UP Power, Kevin McNulty and Keegan Cooper back with you. An exciting episode of the pod, Keegan, as we're going to start in the NFL because Schefter dropped a little bomb yesterday. Jared Goff has signed a 4-year, $212 million contract extension, $170 million guaranteed for Goff. He's the Lions quarterback. He showed it last year, and Detroit wanted to make it official for the next 4 years that they're sticking with Goff.
Did I see it coming? Yes, just because of the success that the Lions have had, and you see who's at the front of that. Jared Goff is there. Does he deserve it? Yes. But now it's, all right, you got the big boy contract. The team is with you. Now you got to go out and perform this upcoming season.
The term that I like that I heard used yesterday is going forward, the Lions will have to do some salary cap gymnastics. I think that's a good way to describe it. They're not necessarily in a bad position, but it's just the truth in the NFL. When you lock up your franchise quarterback, that's what the Lions did yesterday, you have less money to spend elsewhere. And you look at what the Chiefs have done with their secondary when they won their second Super Bowl in this era 2 years ago. It was the youngest defense in the NFL. All the defensive backs, mostly rookies, went out there and won them a Super Bowl over Philadelphia. Still a young defense last year. It was the best defense in the league. They did pay Chris Jones, so they managed to do that while taking on Mahomes' contract. So I think that is what's in the Lions' future, is probably only picking one guy in their defense to lock up long term while they have Goff under contract. Of course, this comes after Penei Sewell and Amon-Ra St. Brown were locked up earlier this offseason. So my first thought, actually, when I heard the news, besides what the Lions are going to have to manage with their salary cap going forward, is that Sewell, Goff, and St. Brown are going to be the Lions that all their fans remember of this era of Detroit football, which obviously should be a memorable one based on the success they had last year, going forward with a very similar team in the next year, high expectations. But St. Brown, Sewell, and Goff are going to be a part of that offense for a very long time now.
Which I think is a relief for Jared Goff to know that he has these guys
for
that
sure
he's going to be able to go to. And so I think there's almost less pressure now, right? You sign the big contract, and that's enough pressure because, when you make that amount of money, you're going to be expected to perform. But you look at who the Lions are bringing in and have brought in and have kept there. Jared Goff is in a really good place and, should be a happy guy to be the Lions franchise quarterback.
To my point about filling out the defense with some younger guys, because you're going to have to do that when you pay your quarterback $170 million guaranteed with their first 2 draft picks. Defensive backs. Terry and Arnold out of Alabama. Most guys drafted on defense in the secondary out of Bama over the past 10 years, 15 years since Saban has been there, have been really strong NFL players, especially the guys that go in the first round. So you expect that from Terry and Arnold. He's on a rookie contract. That helps. And then Ennis Rakestraw, you take in the second round. So he's a second-round talent that you're also putting into that defense. Good move. It makes sense, I think. Pretty much everyone across the league thinks Brad Holmes is a very smart guy. So a little bit of a risk locking up Goff for 4 years just because he is going into his 30s and, has had some down years in the past. Obviously, last year with the Lions, when he had the weapons like Jahmyr Gibbs and St. Brown and Sam Laporta, he was really strong. Also had a good offensive line. Penei Sewell was a big part of that. He's going to be there moving forward. So it just makes sense, like you said, that they lock these guys up. This is what they're going to ride with going forward. And then on top of that, they have really young guys on the offense, too, that they, of course, will have to make decisions on going forward. I'm talking about Jahmyr Gibbs, Sam Laporta, 2 of the best rookies on offense in the entire league last year. Those are some young talents that were also huge for Goff's success in 2023.
Yeah, and you see what those rookies did in their first season last year and how far the Lions got. Now having a year under their belt, familiar with the same quarterback. The Lions...
It's all there. It's a core.
Yeah, it's a core,
even though, as I mentioned, Goff is going on 30 years old, it's still a core. And Jared being a pretty similar quarterback to, say a Kirk Cousins, a guy that stays in the pocket a lot, can sling it. And Kirk Cousins just signed just as big of a deal with Atlanta at age 36 for 4 years.
Yeah.
So Jared Goff has a long future ahead of him, even though he, is in his prime right now and will be probably exiting that somewhat soon. But he's the kind of player that has sustainable success in this league. So very exciting time for the Lions. Also yesterday in the NFL, Antoine Winfield of the Buccaneers becomes the highest paid defensive back in the league. That was a guy who had a huge season for Tampa last year, one of the reasons they made it to the playoffs and were taking on the Lions in the divisional round last year. So it's been a lot of teams making these kind of decisions. This offseason, the Lions probably have spent the most money on guys that are already on their roster, but the mindset is looking forward, and certainly exciting after what we saw last year. So think about the division now.
Yeah. Oh, my gosh.
I think it's really, really interesting because the Packers are obviously going to pick up the option on Jordan Love. He's the quarterback moving forward. They have pieced some things together, and the Packers' defense was the issue most of last year. I mean, there were some games when the offense was down, but you look at the last 6-8 weeks of the season, Jordan Love and the offense were cooking. And that continued all the way through the Dallas game in the playoffs. The defense will look different, so I think that's the question mark for the Packers going into next season. Jeff Hafley, the new defensive coordinator, they've also made some moves that you think that side of the ball will be better. And, of course, that was a team that went to the divisional round last year and ended up losing to definitely a more talented team in San Francisco that went all the way on to the Super Bowl. So the division's exciting.
Yeah,
especially when you think about Minnesota, when they had a quarterback last year. It was a really good team. They still have a guy named Justin Jefferson, who's the best receiver in the league. And then what Chicago has done with their defensive core, the only question mark for them is the rookie quarterback that they drafted number 1 overall. But with what they surrounded him with, there's no saying that he can't have a rookie season close to, if not better than C.J. Stroud, which would mean all 4 teams are really in this thing next year.
I mean, it very well could be, and I think will be, the most competitive division next year in the NFL. And you look at veteran quarterbacks, rookie quarterbacks, and defensive questions up in the air, but everyone has made those changes. We've seen it with who they brought in, who they drafted. Now it's like, can we get to week 1 of football and see how it plays out?
I think it's pretty rare that you get 1 through 4 in a division where you say that team's ready to win right now. And maybe Minnesota doesn't have their answer at quarterback because you think they'll start Sam Darnold to start the season and see how far along J.J. McCarthy comes along. And then, of course, Chicago's already said Caleb Williams is their starter. The only thing with that is he's a rookie. Even though he's this great talent, one of the most highly touted talents to come out of college in quite a few years, still going to be a rookie. So those 2 teams have more question marks than the Packers and the Lions, but they will be battling it out. I'm really excited. Schedule release tomorrow night.
Yeah.
So we will know how it's going to go throughout the entire course of the season. Of course, the Packers will open up Friday night, week 1 in Brazil. That's going to make our life hell that night.
Yeah.
Week 2 of high school football, and throw the Packers in there. So we'll have that for you on Friday Night Fever when the time comes. But we have a couple of the other games we know. Obviously, the Packers will be in prime time. That one will be streamed on Peacock, so won't even be on linear TV. The NFL keeps throwing in all these games on different days of the week, and they'll be playing games on Christmas Day, which is a Wednesday. So I think that's part of the reason the schedule release got pushed back a week. So they have to figure out, who's going to play on a Wednesday when you're normally playing on Sunday or Monday.
Yeah.
That's tricky.
It's going to be tricky, and touch on it. Kansas City will open the season
against Baltimore on Thursday. That's exciting. A rematch
exciting.
of the AFC Championship.
AFC Championship, and people are like, "Oh, is Kansas City going to fall off?" No, The answer is no. I think that if you think that they're going to fall off or not be competitive, you're wrong. In my opinion, you're wrong. I think Kansas City could win another Super Bowl.
Yeah, of course. Chiefs opened the season last year as the defending Super Bowl champions, and the Lions went in there and beat them. And that's when the Lions, in my eyes, really arrived.
Yeah.
Last season, winning that game in Arrowhead, week 1 of the football season. Yeah. So we are ready to switch gears to more football that we're looking forward to. We talked about it on this program a bunch last week. We went through the rosters for the UP Football All-Star Game, which is coming up in really just a couple of weeks, a little more than a month, as we get set for June 22nd at 1 p.m. at the Superior Dome, the UP Football All-Star Game. We got to look at the coaching staffs.
Yeah, of course.
For each team, and I'll go through, of course. We mentioned how the coaches from Gladstone and Menominee kept their players all on one roster. Yeah. The other guys kind of scattered about, but the Gladstone coaching staff leading Team Black, Travis Wiltzius, the head coach of Gladstone, will be the offensive coordinator. He will be the head coach and offensive coordinator. Then Jared Diagnos, special teams coordinator, also from Gladstone. Dave Wilson coming from Escanaba, so a lot of those guys. He's the running backs coach and tight ends coach. Josh Fronte of Calumet will coach the offensive line. Tim Driscoll of Houghton is your defensive coordinator and coaching the defensive backs. Eli Luma of Houghton will coach the linebackers. Bob Drazen, UP legend, as he's listed on here, when they put out the rosters for the coaching staffs as well, defensive line, and then Vince LaVille. If I butchered any names, I apologize. Coming from Engadine to coach the quarterbacks. So you see the Gladstone, group is there. You've got a coach from Escanaba in there as well. So that's who's leading Team Black, of course, all the Gladstone guys, Nate Young among them, that will be leading Team Black. So a lot of Braves representation.
Yeah, no, exciting to see this coaching staff. And I think what's exciting about the UP All-Star Game is, these coaches, you compete against other teams every year, all year, This one game, you get to kind of come together and see the different schemes kind of meld.
Right, like an Esky coach joining the Gladstone coaches.
They're competitors, they're rivals. So it'll be exciting to see them have the chance to, scheme together and, for one game and kind of see.
Yeah, it's just for a week. They're not going all in. But we talked about this last week, how, these players usually give it their all in this game. It's not an NBA All-Star game, and obviously they don't want to get hurt, but they're not worried about that. And fortunately, there haven't been too many injuries in the past. Hopefully that's the same case this year. Team Red, obviously the Menominee representation, the team that went all the way to the D7 title game at Ford Field last season. Chad Brandt, Menominee's head coach, will lead Team Red. Mason Cooley, the defensive coordinator, will also coach the defensive line for Team Red. Lucas Chouinard of Menominee, wide receivers coach. Dave Matthew of Menominee will be coaching the offensive line. See, there's even more Menominee representation on this coaching staff. Dave Clark is the assistant offensive line coach for this weekend. And then another UP head coach. We're really excited. Coaching the linebackers, Robin Martela, the head coach of Iron Mountain. Fired up. He better be ready for an interview. One of the days that week.
We will be there. I want to see what he has to say.
Oh, yeah. Well, he's got to learn all the players' names from all the different schools and then list them for us, which we love when Robin does.
Yeah, we do. It's the same thing here. This coaching staff for Team Red, I think, led by Menominee. It'll be exciting to see how they scheme together. And, we watched the coaching staff for Menominee as we covered them, and they went all the way to, Ford Field in Detroit. We saw them kind of scheme together. So for them to get back together and then to get back with some coaches from some other schools, it's an exciting week. And for these athletes and for these coaching staffs, kind of a week to enjoy. And then, of course, all the lead up to the game. And play with a little bit of pride knowing you're an UP All-Star and you want your team to win.
Oh, absolutely. And joining Coach Martela and the Menominee coaches on the Team Red staff is also Steve Noasconi from Kingsford and Eric Johnson from Kingsford, defensive backs and defensive line, respectively. So those were 3 outstanding teams.
Yeah.
In 2023, we talked about Menominee. Iron Mountain went deep, and Kingsford went deep in Division 5 as well. So really good coaches on both sides, but Team Red with those 3 schools being represented on the coaching staffs, it'll be really exciting. And the game on their Facebook page also teased a celebrity coach for each team. So I don't know if you have any guesses, Keegan, but that is really exciting that there's going to be one more celeb shot out there on the coaching staffs. Yeah, it makes you think, doesn't it?
Brainstorm, celebrity, who would I?
I don't know if it's someone who's retired or someone who's moved on to coach somewhere else.
Yeah, I don't know.
Could be interesting. I imagine we will find out soon.
Find out. We'll have to maybe put some guesses in as we approach closer.
For sure, and when that week rolls around, as I mentioned, UP Football All-Star Game at the Superior Dome on June 22nd, 1 in the afternoon. TV6 will have coverage there all week, and 1 week before that is the UP Basketball All-Star Game at St. Ignace, June 15th, so we're looking forward to that as well. At the Iggy Zone, legendary gym, that's where they had it last year. They've done it plenty of years in the past with the UP All-Star basketball game, so looking forward to that. I'm sure a lot of the football players that will be playing in the game will also be at the basketball All-Star game as well.
Yeah. No.
And speaking of St. Ignace, we'll talk about Saturday a little bit because Doug Engels, one of the 10 new members inducted into the UP Sports Hall of Fame this past weekend. Doug, one of the younger people inducted this time around, just recently retired from St. Ignace, but it was good being in that room for me to see a reminder of all the guys he played with at Gladstone. That's where he went to high school. And then he played his college ball at NMU, and a lot of his NMU teammates and people he knew there were around. And Doug Engels, the only triple-double in Northern Michigan history, and is still their all-time assist leader. And I'm sure his son Johnny doesn't want to break that record because he'd rather be scoring all the points.
Yeah, no, I mean, when you look at Doug Engels as a head coach and not only his playing career, but his coaching career, well-deserved, just, a joy to watch coach on the sidelines and, for him to retire. And
really good coach.
Really good coach and well-deserved. And all of those inductees, all 10 of those inductees, when you look at the impact that they left on Upper Peninsula athletics.
Oh, for sure.
It's just,
in many different areas.
And in many different sports, and whether you were playing or coaching, the impact felt. I think that was, so huge. Just listening to their speeches and kind of taking it all in about it's a huge deal and just a great honor for these athletes and coaches to be recognized and to be up there with the best of the best in the UP.
For sure. It's the Hall of Fame. It's been going for many, many years, and all of the members of the Hall of Fame have a different story, which I think is exciting for me. We started talking about Doug because that's someone that I knew personally before watching his induction on Saturday, but I learned so much just being in that room about some of these great people and what they were able to accomplish. Shell Chapman was inducted playing at Marquette for the girls basketball team in the 70s and 80s. She was an incredible player, and she is unfortunately deceased, but the words spoken by one of her former teammates carried waves throughout the entire room. So learning about her was amazing, and someone just like her who was there to accept her award, Jill Watun-Bodo, who had an unbelievable career at Kearney Nato, of course, a small high school, and it was when she was playing there back in the day. 81-1 in her 3 seasons as a starter. I mean, that is ridiculous. She went on to play at Lake Superior State, but what a run it was for Chilwatun Bodo at Carney NATO, and having that moment to remind everyone of how great those teams were in the past was pretty remarkable. Fritz Wilson, I really enjoyed his speech. Coached at both Menominee and Houghton for many, many years in basketball. And, he's telling a story. I believe he graduated from Marquette Pierce High School, which no longer exists. It's just senior high school in Marquette now, but in 1954. So he's telling stories about, post-war and what it was like, trying to get a hoop on his garage. And that was really cool to hear. And then for many, many years, he went on to, influence young players' lives as they played basketball for him. So that was a speech I really enjoyed. Candy Sweatkiss, who we talked about a little bit, passed away in 2022, but they just had the first annual Candy Sweatkiss Memorial Softball Tournament in Escanaba. And what she did for the game of softball, not only that area, but the entire UP, you could feel it on that day as they began that tournament for the first time.
Yeah, you could. I was there, and just not only the game, but just taking in the community there, and seeing the banners and seeing kind of the memorabilia and what she did for the game of softball in the UP, a place where summer outside sports are not played as much.
Yeah.
So to have that impact and to grow baseball and softball to what it is today, I'm excited to see that tournament next year and the following years and grow more teams and continue to grow.
And especially for women who wanted to get out there on the diamond. This was a note that was shared after she was inducted by someone who knew Candy very well. She sued the city of Escanaba because they made her girls women's softball team play on the crappier field that wasn't well kept. And she said, well, why can't we play on the other field that is maintained? And she won, which is really cool. This is like pre-Title IX. You forget how difficult it was. So a well-deserved honor for her. She'll also be going into the Michigan Softball Hall of Fame later this year. That was announced on Saturday. So that's really cool for her. Terry Smith, who played basketball at Forest Park, and then went on to coach basketball for 25 years at the college level at Lake State, at Grand Valley State. He had a lot of great things to say. He's worked as an analyst in the WNBA and for South Carolina since Dawn Staley's been there. So those national championship winning teams, he was helping out on the basketball sides of things in an advisory role. So that was really interesting to hear from him, a guy who obviously grew up here in the UP, learned to play basketball in the UP, but also has gone all over the place to, coach basketball, and is really well known in coaching circles. So his speech was awesome coming back home, and being a part of it. You could tell it meant a lot to him. Moving forward, Mark Marana, who most recently the offensive coordinator at Negaunee, part of the 2002 state championship team, which Paul Jacobson was the head coach. Even back then, 22 years ago, but Mark Marana also coached at NMU and was an all-state quarterback at Ishpeming when they won the state championship in 1975. It was funny hearing him talk about the banner that goes up in the Ishpeming High School gym. Well, there's going to be another one here soon, but
shortly,
that was something we learned a lot about, is how much pride is taken in those banners. I think he was right. I just mentioned he was an all-state quarterback, but he said during his speech he doesn't care about any of that. It's about the team championship, because everyone contributed to that. And he's right. People don't forget it.
Yeah, no, people don't. And when you win a state championship for your high school, that team is forever, immortalized. And that banner goes up, and it doesn't come down unless they build a new gym and then they hang them up in there.
Even if it's almost 50 years later, he certainly right about that. Karen Olsen Flanagan also went in. Thought it was cool to have a figure skating icon in there. She spent many years teaching figure skating and skating in New York. Cream of the crop, but Marquette native who began skating, right here. And she's 88 years old, so sharing stories about the last time she was on skates was at age 70, which is super impressive. So she had great stories to tell. She comes from hockey royalty, the Olsen family, here in the UP as well. So a lot of great stories told. Also going in posthumously, Buddy Duggan, a boxer and boxing coach. Those stories were great. His granddaughter accepted his award, and Whitey Horka, who, men's fast pitch softball, was a really big deal in his day, and his award was accepted on his behalf, but you could tell all the wonderful things that people had to say about him. He's from the Sault Ste. Marie area, so a lot of representation from the Eastern UP in that room as well on Saturday. Just a great event, and we'll see who's going in next year. I'm sure a lot of familiar names, but always good to hear about these legends and what they have to say when, mostly all said and done. Like I mentioned, Doug Ingles, the last to retire just a couple of months ago, and reflecting on their careers and the impact that they had. And of course, thanking a lot of people that helped them out along the way.
Yeah, what they've done for not only the athletes that they've coached, but the game itself and the community around that game. I mean, we get to see that every day that we're out at, games or events or stuff, but how much the community, each community, cares about its athletic programs and really everything, athletics, arts, academics. It's to quote a coach that we talked to a lot this past year, it's like a big family, and it really is. And to see an event like this to honor those who came before,
right,
and kind of set the way, it's just an awesome, amazing honor.
Yeah, and speaking of Ishpeming State Championship banners, we have a very exciting week because our baby we've been working on for probably 6 weeks now?
6 weeks now, yeah.
A full 30-minute special on the Ishpeming girls basketball team, their state championship run. It is finally ready to be shown off to the whole school Thursday morning at Ishpeming High School. We are debuting that special. I know we are very proud of it. Yeah. And then, of course, it will be available on TV6 Plus, and it will air. Let me pull up the air dates so I don't get them incorrect.
There we go.
It will air Thursday at 7:30 Eastern on Fox UP. That's this Thursday. Then again, Saturday, 7:30 Eastern on TV6. And one more time on Sunday, 9 a.m. Eastern, back on Fox UP. So 3 times you can catch it on our airways. And then after that, will be available on TV6 Plus. But in a nutshell, Keegan, as we went through the stories we wanted to tell about that team, and also, anecdotes we wanted to share, some statistics that were really important for their run. What was the most enjoyable part of putting that together and looking through their entire season and their run to their state title?
Man, I mean, just the the copious interviews that we did, but the
yeah, exactly.
I think the message, I think the overarching message for me was any team can do what they did this past year, right? And this is what goes into it, and we really got to dive into what did they do in the off season? What did they, what was that like of, walking in the gym and the whole team is there? It's an open gym, right? It's the middle of summer, but you have your entire team.
Right, totally voluntary, like, hey, gym's open if you want to go in. That says a lot.
Yeah, they wanted it. They had a goal, and this is where they wanted to get, and they achieved that. I could say, digging in the tapes, digging in the TV6 basement for old tapes, for old footage, but getting to, look through that stuff and see the history of, that gym where that banner is going to hang has been played in for years and years and years and years. Getting to meet some of the members of the first Ishpeming girls basketball team.
That's another one.
And what they did, and how they got it all started. And 50 years later, they win a state championship on the anniversary year, 50 years of their team being around. It was a joy. I think it was a privilege to tell that story and be along for the ride, because they worked for it and they deserve, every piece of recognition, every award. They deserve that state championship.
It goes to show you what a sports team can accomplish when they all set their minds to one thing. Because as you'll find out if you watch, and I'll spoil this right now, Jenna Mackey said she walked into the first day of practice and knew they could do it.
Yeah.
And it was the first day of practice. Why? Because they all set their mind to it. Some of them set their mind to it when they were in third grade. And they were 10 years old and going to Ishpeming games said, we should just win a state championship. It's that easy. And then they did it. No, it's not. But talking to Ryan Riegel, who gives everything to that team and developing them, like you said, in the offseason, then during the season. He's a film junkie for high school girls basketball.
Yeah.
Not all coaches are film junkies. A lot of them, unfortunately, just cashing a check.
Yeah.
Not Ryan Riegel.
No.
He's locked in, and it's a trite comment, but you hear a lot that teams take on the attitude of their head coach. Certainly the case with Ishpeming. Yeah. Why? Because Ryan Riegel was so locked in on helping them achieve their dreams, and he knew how exactly they could do it with that team they had this past year. Obviously very talented, but if that wasn't the goal, if they didn't set out to win a state championship, they wouldn't have done it.
Yeah.
Because it's just too easy to be lazy and just show up to practice, say, all right, go through the motions, pull up to games, probably going to win a lot of them because you're talented, like I mentioned, but would have been so easy to say, oh, we can lose some games and whatever. No, they lost one to one of the best teams in the state in Negaunee, and they turned that in to a long win streak to end the season, going all the way to East Lansing and getting it done. Like I said, they knew how to do it. All the girls bought in, and their coach bought in, and that's the entire staff with Josh Eagle and Paige Yoho as well. So really cool to dive into that. The old footage that you mentioned, another spoiler is Ryan Riegel in his playing days at Westwood and at NMU. Some really good stuff about his journey all the way through, now spending 9 seasons at Ishpeming and reaching the mountaintop in March, and it was really fun. Really excited to show that off to all the Hematites there in Ish on Thursday. And then, like I mentioned, please tune in when it airs on Fox UP on Thursday and Sunday, and then on TV6 on Saturday. As I mentioned, will be available to stream as well. So, cool week for us.
Cool week.
A lot of hard work into that, telling their stories, and really excited to show it off, like I mentioned.
Yeah, excited to see it come to fruition.
We will wrap up with some interesting news today, because Green Bay men's basketball really stood out this past season under head coach Sundance Wicks. Came in and orchestrated one of the biggest turnarounds in college basketball in Division I last year, taking a team that won less than 5 games a year before, and they were above 500 this past year. We were paying attention to them quite a bit because Foster Wonders, one of the best high school players here in the UP of all time from Iron Mountain, transferred from Southern Illinois to Green Bay this past season. Had a great year, averaged about 8 points per game off the bench for the Phoenix, but Sundance Wicks came from Wyoming, and that job opened up just last week. Spent a lot of time there as an assistant coach, only 1 year at Green Bay, but I think everyone sort of understood that he would go home and try and build his own program the way he kind of turned Green Bay around in 1 year. So it's an unfortunate set of circumstances that you have this really great coach come in here for 1 year, but the job he's always wanted opened up. I don't think anyone blamed him for going home and taking that job in Wyoming. On the flip side of it, Green Bay has accelerated its search for a new head coach, and I texted you the other day that I thought perhaps a college basketball coach from the UP who happens to recruit Wisconsin very well and was also a guest on this podcast not too long ago would possibly be considered. But we find out this morning that a leading candidate is Doug Gottlieb, the sports radio personality who played at Oklahoma State back in the day but hasn't been a coach. He's been on radio and TV for a long time, and it looks like the two sides are making headway, and he has been offered the job at Green Bay. Not what I expected.
Not what I expected, right? When you think about offering a coaching job to someone, you think they've had coaching experience, right? Or they've played. Now,
which Gottlieb has.
Which Gottlieb has, and he's been around the game. So it was interesting to me. But again, you can't. Don't judge a book by its cover. Right?
I'm not willing to say it's a bad thing.
Yeah. No, it could be. It could.
It's just interesting.
Yeah, it was an interesting move.
And let me look one more thing up because I'm really curious to know how this came about. But from what I've heard and read, is that Doug Gottlieb has been vying for a head coaching job for a couple of years. And was waiting for a program like Green Bay to say, yeah, we'll give it a shot with you. You're a great college basketball player, obviously very in tune with the game, being on the radio every day and mostly talking basketball. He was recently under some heat for claiming that Caitlin Clark has a mechanical flaw in her shot and questioned if she should try to address that during the WNBA offseason. And a lot of people were like, isn't that the leading scorer of women's college basketball ever?
Yeah, and
you want to change your shot? There is some merit to a lot of guys and women that go into the NBA or WNBA do work on their shot and the mechanics of their shot. So it's not saying that Caitlin Clark is immune to that, but people at first reaction were like, whoa, Doug, why are you trying to change her shot?
She's okay.
So that was only a couple weeks ago. Obviously, that really has no bearing on whether or not he gets offered the Green Bay job. But again, I'm curious to understand how this went down, if it was Gottlieb saying, hey, I'm the right man for the job, because it seems a little different from what we maybe expected Green Bay to do. Like I mentioned, going for maybe a D2 coach who's had a lot of success in the area, or somebody that was on Wicks's staff previously, or another coach from the Horizon League or mid-major level that has been emerging. Instead, is Doug Gottlieb, a name a lot of us know from TV and otherwise. So it's interesting. The other part of it is Foster Wonders, a guy we follow pretty closely. Is he going to stay and play under Doug Gottlieb? As I mentioned, it's expected to be announced today on Tuesday that Doug Gottlieb will be the new head coach at Green Bay. So it's interesting. Obviously, the transfer portal reopens for players who have a head coaching change for a certain period of time. So Foster Wonders could make the decision to play for a third school during his college career, or he could stay on at Green Bay, where he had a lot of success last year. But this was definitely change he wasn't expecting. And I know, hearing from him during this past season, he really loved the situation he was in with Coach Wicks. So that's another piece of it that we'll be following.
It will be interesting to see how it all shakes out.
It is, and it surprised me. Obviously, the Green Bay women's program, we were on top of that. Had a coaching change this past year with Kevin Borseth retiring, a guy who's in the UP Sports Hall of Fame from Bessemer and coached at Tech for many years. So they went out, the women's program, and hired an alumni. One of the best players that Borseth coached at Green Bay, the Horizon League Player of the Year in 2011. So they went a different route with the women's basketball program, which has been more successful than the men's program. And now the men and that team looks like they have their guy, Doug Gottlieb. It's very interesting.
Yeah, very interesting. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. That's what we'll have to wait and see.
We will, and like I said, not official, just out there that the sides are very close, and there may be an announcement today on Tuesday. Last thing, the Brewers playing really good baseball, Tigers playing some pitiful baseball.
Not so good baseball.
Brewers last night, exciting stuff.
Exciting stuff, and I just, it's... How do you, and I'm looking at it right now because I'm not in tune with all with everything. Brewers lose last night, right?
And after all, it's May.
And it is May. Brewers lose last night, but the offense finally gets going, right? The finally gets going. They get some runners aboard, and they lose 8-6 against the Pirates, and they're playing. They got the Pirates 2 more times.
Did they see Paul Skeens, who made his major league debut on Saturday?
I'm looking.
Maybe. While you look, that was exciting. Paul Skeens on Saturday, pitching against the Cubs, struck out the first 2 batters. This is a guy that came out of LSU, probably the most highly touted pitching prospect since Steven Strasburg.
Yeah.
So he made his major league debut, pitched at LSU, and some Tigers went 1-2 overall in the MLB draft last year. Skeens to Pittsburgh and Dylan Cruz to Washington, but he only went 4 innings and was humming over 100 for a lot of his pitches. So a lot of people speculating about his arm health, of course, because that starts right away when you get into the MLB and you throw over 100 miles an hour. But he went 4 innings, gave up 3 runs, struck out 7. He looked really good right off the bat, like I said. But then, in his first game of his career kind of fell off. In a game against the Cubs, a pretty good lineup as well. So think about that as, the Tigers' worst record in the American League in the month of May.
Yeah.
So that's not ideal. Also the worst team OPS in the league in the month of May.
And they're still above 500, barely.
They are 21-20, which is 4th place in the AL Central. Of course, the White Sox are going to sit in 5th all year.
Yeah.
You can count on that. A team that took 3 or 4 from the first place Guardians this weekend.
A division that they're in that the Tigers should at least be in the top 3. If not, I think they could take the division if they could win some baseball games.
I think a lot of these AL Central teams are similar. And Cleveland doesn't spend a lot of money. They like their young guys and see what they can piece together with that, and have had a lot of success under Terry Francona. Now it's Stephen Vogt leading their clubhouse. Minnesota Twins won the division last year, won a playoff series for the first time in forever. They got to be up there. They actually have a little bit of star power with Carlos Correa and Joe Ryan on their pitching staff. Then Kansas City also piecing together a young team around Bobby Witt Jr., who's locked up forever and ever. He signed a 10-year deal, and he's extremely talented, so totally understand that. You have those 4 teams in the Central where I think they'll be bunched up for quite a while, and I think we saw even this past weekend, the White Sox will probably steal some games from these teams as well, but they won't be contending for sure. Yeah, in the NL Central, the Brewers and Cubs, it's early, it's May, but they're kind of in a division race already, which I think is exciting. Cubs at 24-18, Brewers 24-17, so a half-game lead right now as we stand on May 14th. But the Cubs bullpen has been terrible. I would expect that to be a little better going forward, and they've also been banged up. Now the Brewers, and it's funny that they're in that race with the Cubs because their manager left to go manage the Cubs, but they've been playing good solid baseball. Willie Damas been awesome. Stole that game in Kansas City last week, and Rhys Hoskins was a good pickup. It's been going yard quite a bit as well. So I like where the Brewers are at right now, even though they've lost 2 in a row and are 4-6 over the last 10. So we'll see what happens going forward.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at the standings now, and I'm just like,
There's not a huge point in looking at the standings, but
no, yeah. And
it's a good gauge because before you know it, we're going to be at the trade deadline and talking about these teams. Are they buying or selling?
Yeah.
Which is obviously important.
And if they are buying, what are they buying? And if they're selling, who are they getting rid of, right?
Exactly, things like that. But Brewers have certainly set themselves up to be in a division race. The Tigers need to hit better. And maybe DFA Javi Baez, because he's statistically one of the worst hitters in baseball, which is crazy to say because when he came up with the Cubs,
he was very good.
He was a big deal, and he was very good.
Javi Baez hit bombs, and now he does not.
It's been the case. I think it was 2020, around that time, when Sports Illustrated was still a thing, the cover was Javi Baez with the Cubs and Tim Anderson with the White Sox, and it was like the future of baseball. And those guys are like the worst two hitters.
Yeah, they're not.
When you put everything together, OPS and all that. Over the past 2 years, they're the two worst hitters in baseball among qualified players. So that hasn't been the case. That's the thing. You never really know with the old stick and ball game. So that'll do it for us. Thanks so much for joining us on Facebook Live here Tuesday afternoon or later on YouTube or Spotify. We will be back with you in a couple of weeks after I get back from my little vacation, and we will go all in on those 2 All-Star games that we talked about. We are looking forward to those as we head into the summertime. Both of us have a little color in our face. It feels good. So thanks for joining us on this edition of UP Power. We'll catch you next time.